The silent pressure cooker, understanding repressed anger. Anger is often viewed as a negative emotion, a fiery, destructive force that we are taught to extinguish the moment it flickers. From childhood, many of us are told to calm down, be the bigger person, or keep the peace. While well-intentioned, this social conditioning often leads to repressed anger, the subconscious process of pushing feelings of resentment or frustration out of conscious awareness. Unlike suppressed anger, where you know you're mad but choose to hide it, repressed anger is buried so deep that the individual may not even realize it's there. However, emotions are energy, and energy cannot be destroyed. It can only be displaced. The architecture of avoidance. Why do we bury our fire? Usually it's a survival mechanism. If a child grows up in a household where expressing anger results in punishment or abandonment, they learn that anger is dangerous. To stay safe, they disconnect from the feeling entirely. As adults, this manifests as toxic positivity or a people-pleasing persona. The individual becomes a nice guy or nice girl who never complains, yet feels a constant, inexplicable sense of exhaustion or resentment toward the world. The physical and mental toll. When anger isn't given a voice, it speaks through the body. This is often referred to as somatization. Because the mind refuses to acknowledge the emotional pain, the body takes the hit. Common physical manifestations include chronic tension, jaw clenching, tension headaches, and tight shoulders. Digestive issues. The gut-brain axis is highly sensitive to stress. Repressed rage often leads to IBS or stomach ulcers. Passive aggression. Since the anger can't come out directly, it leaks out sideways through sarcasm, procrastination, or forgetting commitments. Mentally, repressed anger is a leading contributor to depression. As the famous psychological saying goes, depression is anger turned inward. When you spend all your internal energy keeping a lid on your true feelings, there is no energy left for joy or creativity. The path to integration. Healing from repressed anger isn't about becoming a volatile person. It's about integration. It involves moving from a state of denial to a state of awareness. Acknowledge the validity. Anger is a boundary-setting tool. It tells you when something is unfair, or when you are being mistreated. Physical release. Since repressed anger lives in the body, movement is essential. High-intensity exercise, rage rooms, or even screaming into a pillow can help move that stagnant energy. Shadow work. Journaling or therapy can help identify the forbidden thoughts that were tucked away years ago. Repressed anger is like holding a beach ball underwater. It takes immense effort to keep it submerged, and eventually, it will pop to the surface with unpredictable force. By learning to sit with our frustration and acknowledge its source, we stop being victims of our own subconscious and start living more authentic, vibrant lives. To go deeper, we have to look past the surface symptoms and examine the neurological and systemic ways that buried rage restructures a person's reality. When anger is repressed, it doesn't just sit still. It curdles into a lens through which the entire world is viewed. When you habitually repress anger, you are essentially creating a civil war between the prefrontal cortex, the logical center, and the amygdala, the emotional alarm system. Over time, this constant suppression can lead to a state of functional dissociation. To keep the anger down, the brain numbs the emotional processing centers. The tragedy of repression is that the brain cannot selectively numb emotions. When you dampen your capacity for rage, you inadvertently dampen your capacity for high-level joy, passion, and intimacy. You end up living in a gray zone of emotional flatness. The anger-sadness conversion. In many psychological frameworks, repressed anger acts as a foundational layer for chronic shame. The logic. I feel a boundary was crossed, but I am not allowed to be angry. Therefore, the fault must lie with me for feeling this way. The result. The energy that should have been used to push back against an external injustice is turned into a corrosive internal dialogue. This is why people with repressed anger often struggle with a harsh inner critic that attacks their every move. The shadow and the niceness trap. The Swiss psychiatrist Carl Jung spoke extensively about the shadow, the parts of ourselves we deem unacceptable and push into the unconscious. Everyone carries a shadow, and the less it is embodied in the individual's conscious life, the blacker and denser it is. Carl Jung. When anger is relegated to the shadow, it begins to project onto others. You might find yourself disproportionately irritated by aggressive people or selfish individuals. Often, you are reacting to the very qualities you have forbidden yourself from expressing. The nice person persona becomes a cage, where every act of kindness is secretly fueled by a fear of conflict, rather than genuine altruism. Deep healing often requires moving beyond talk therapy and into somatic, body-based experiencing. Because the trauma of silenced anger is stored in the nervous system, you must teach the body it is safe to be dangerous. Subscribe to Libido Lab. Learn more about yourself and your emotions.